From the BBC World Service, in association with ABC and Akashvani, this is Stumped.
Hello and welcome to Stumped, your intercontinental hit of news, features and debate from the quirky world of cricket. I'm Alison Mitchell in London, where the Anderson-Tendulkar trophy is reaching its climax down at the Oval. And we're gearing up for cricket at the other end of the spectrum. The Fast and Furious 100 is gearing up as well.
Hello, Jim Maxwell for the ABC in Sydney. It's cool in Sydney and you wouldn't want to be playing a test match at the SCG. You'd be walking around like a duck. It's so damp here. But we can relax throughout the evening and watch some cricket from other places and watch India and England have a little bit of fun. A bit of jousting going on, it seems. Hopefully the series finishes on a high note.
Yeah, and I'm Sunil Gupta for Akashvani in New Delhi, and we're also inundated here, Jim. It's a lot of rain over here, a lot of flooding, and a lot of flooding on the news, exactly, in the cricket games that are taking place in England, what happened at Old Trafford, what happened at the end of the game at Old Trafford, what's going to happen in the Oval. A very important piece of news here from India is that a young Indian lady, 19 years old, Divya Deshmukh, has won the World Chess Championship. And so India is right on top. But the point and the way that it connects to cricket, Ali and Jim, is that her prize money, remember she's a world champion, is $50,000, which I was calculating is what Mitch Starc gets for bowling 1 over in the IPL. But that is the difference, really, between cricket and other sport, at least in this part of the world.
Yep, cricket, it's a good career choice for men and women. Now, coming up on the show, we're going to be discussing how the likes of Sachin Tendulkar, Joe Root and Ricky Ponting became the greatest men's test batters of all time. But first of all, let's talk about the fifth and final test between England and India at the Oval, because Joe Root and his England team are in action again against India. And with England 2-1 up, they know as long as they avoid defeat, they will win the series. India must win this test to avoid what would be another series defeat under coach Gautam Gambhir. England will have to do it without their captain, though. Ben Stokes isn't playing in London this week because of a shoulder injury that he picked up during that fourth test in Manchester. That's going to keep him out for 6 to 7 weeks. He said he was disappointed, but the risk was just too high to play. And this is, of course, with one eye on the Ashes winter that is coming up. Sunil, Stokes has been England's best bowler in this series, so him being out is a massive blow for England and a huge boost for India. Did it make big waves when it was announced that he'd be out?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, there was some headline news on this. A little bit of schadenfreude as well, as you can imagine, what took place at Old Trafford. And I told you so and all that sort of thing. But personally, I think that is the other tenor that I get from the news reports that came out yesterday and today, is that he's really been the difference between the two sides. And I don't mean just the captaincy and the batting and the bowling. I mean, he does everything. You can replace a captain, you can replace a bowler, you can replace a batter, but you cannot replace the X factor. And Ben Stokes has been the X factor.
Jim, given sort of how little Stokes had played before the series, because he was coming back from injury, and then how much effort he has put into it, did you feel it was inevitable that he wouldn't make it through all 5 matches, or has this come as a bit of a surprise?
Oh, yeah, I think it was inevitable. In fact, the more his career goes, the more inevitable it is that he's going to miss matches, I think, despite the fact that he is ruthless, relentless, and a champion and all those things. He wants to play. He wants to defy injury most of the time, as he did the other day when he was bowling. Clearly, he wasn't comfortable, but he was the only England bowler on the last day. It looked like taking a wicket, to be honest. So he does make quite a bit of difference to the side in so many ways, and he does want to look after himself if he's to have any influence in a few months' time when the Ashes are on, because if he doesn't turn up as the champion all-rounder and leader of this England team for most of the matches in the series, I can't see how England would win.
I don't know how many people knew the name Lee Fortis before this test match, but I mentioned the confrontation between the head groundsman at the Oval and Gautam Gambhir. But Jim, does the fact that Gambhir, did sort of react in the way that he did suggest that he's feeling under a little bit of pressure himself, the fact that results haven't been the best since he took over as coach?
Yes, I would say that's true, and I'd say some of his selections, or Gambhir with the selectors, whoever is making the final decision, I think they've got it wrong on a few occasions in this series. I think Gambhir is one of those conservatives that favours batting strength and perhaps all-rounders like Jadeja and Sundar rather than specialists. spin bowlers. He hasn't given the left arm wrist spinner a crack at all in this series. Will he in this game? Probably not. So I don't think he's allowed India to play to their full strength by the selections that he's had in this series.
What are the Indian fans saying about Gambhir, Sunil? To what extent is he under pressure from his own supporters?
What Jim said is absolutely right. He's under a lot of pressure. He's been in charge now, 14 games before the Oval, out of which 2 he's won against Bangladesh at home, which let us for a moment discount. And out of the other 12, he's lost 8, won 2. And that is not a good record. Now, you can say everything you say, there's no Sharma, there's no Kohli, there's no... The point is exactly what Jim said. And the only test that India won was when Bumrah wasn't playing. So I've always believed it's not the man, it's the team that you put together. And I've written an article, which you might want to read later on LinkedIn, which says safety first equals victory last. And that is exactly what has happened. But let me tell you, the public has a very short memory, Ali, in this part of the world. He wins at the Oval, and a lot of things will be forgotten, swept under the carpet.
Well, next on Stumped, former England captain Joe Root is up to second on the all-time list of Test run scorers, behind only the great Sachin Tendulkar after his century in the 4th Test against India. He moved above South Africa all-rounder Jacques Kallis, India great Rahul Dravid, and Aussie giant Ricky Ponting with his magnificent 150 at Old Trafford. He finished that match then, Joe Root, with 13,409 runs in what was his 157th Test. Now, Tendulkar played 200 tests and, in fact, played in Root's debut in India in 2012. Sunil, first of all, how are Joe Root's exploits being received in India? And are fans starting to get a bit worried about him overtaking Tendulkar, even though he's more than 2,000 runs behind still?
Right now, no. Ravi Shastri had a bit to say about it in the media, but Sachin hasn't commented on it at all. I mean, I scoured everything that I could possibly, and I think that's absolutely right, because it's still quite a way to go. And if you ask me, actually, I think the Ashes coming up in Australia at the end of this year are going to be his acid test, because I think you know and Jim knows that his Ashes record, especially in Australia, isn't that good. So to my mind, that's one mountain he has to climb if he has to think of the summit of Tendulkar's 15,000 plus runs.
Jim, how highly do you rate Joe Root? And he's number 2 now, officially. Is he up there as your top 2 Test batters of all time in the men's game?
No, I wouldn't say that. There's been a lot of very good players. He's one of them, but I think we go too much on these numbers. And, there's Bradman, and then after that, you can rattle them around. Tendulkar, Lara, Joe Root's pushing up there just because of the numbers. They're mightily impressive. But, we get too carried away with all these claims because of certain people hitting milestones in the game. I think we get a bit overwhelmed. I mean, if you just want to run on stats in the game, Jacques Kallis is the greatest all-rounder the game's ever seen. Well, I think that's nonsense, because Sobers was just exceptional, extraordinary, amazing, but his numbers aren't quite as good as Kallis's. But yeah, Joe Root's going to be one of the greats of the game. Definitely the greatest Yorkshire batsman of all time.
Well, it did feel like quite a moment when he passed Ricky Ponting to take that number 2 slot in the all-time Test run scorers list. Let's speak to someone who has analysed what it takes to score a mountain of Test runs. Cricket writer and broadcaster Jarrod Kimber recently released a book called The Art of Batting, the Craft of Cricket's Greatest Run Scorers. Jarrod, welcome to Stumped. What a perfect time to have you on. First of all, on Joe Root, what is it that makes him so effective with the bat?
He obviously has this incredible history where he grew up on a pitch in Yorkshire that spun, which is not particularly common. He then had a Pakistani player as his coach at a young age, so he learned how to play spin in a different way. So he combines being able to play on English wickets where the ball's nipping around with incredible play of spin. And I remember the first innings at Nagpur thinking, are we sure this guy's come from England? Like, he does not look like a traditional English player. He's also a back foot player, right? So it hasn't quite translated to Australian pitches, but we've certainly seen him in South Africa and on faster pitches play great. So if you put those 3 things together, the ability to play the lateral moving ball, spin, and, faster bowling, you're already on a really good trajectory. But I would also add that I think he's probably the best strike rotator I think I've seen in modern cricket. His ability to get off strike is, I mean, it's just remarkable. And so if there is anything going on in the wicket or a bowler's on top of him for a moment, he just finds a single all the time. And everyone I talk to about Joe Root, people want to talk about his timing and his, professionalism and all this, but they all end up talking about the fact that he can get off strike. And that is such a huge part of batting, right? If you give a great bowler 18 balls directly at you, he's probably eventually going to get you out. But if he keeps having to, recalibrate because you're on and off strike, that's a lot tougher. And I think that's one of maybe his greatest super skill is the ability to hit the ball anywhere on the offside or the leg side and just find one.
And what about the way he has evolved over the years? All batters adapt and evolve. How would you say he's done that?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is it's funny that Jim was bringing up Callis before. There's no doubt that Callis is one of the greatest batters who's ever lived. But Callis played these same innings every single time, right? He played the Jarrod Callis innings. Boycott is probably another player who's quite similar to that. Occasionally they could break out of that. Joe Root, 2/3 of the way through his career or 3/4 of the way through his career, just went, they're playing this baseball stuff. Oh, okay, I'll give this a go. Great players don't usually bend to what the team strategy is. The team strategy usually bends to them, right? The fact that he could suddenly do that, up his strike rate, and still be great, in the way that he has over the last few years, I think is another remarkable thing. And it's not that star players can't do that. It's that star players don't usually even think of doing that, right? I'm very good. I will continue to do that. So the evolution from that point of view, I think is remarkable. And also he got over the emotional thing of making 50s and getting out, right? Which it probably is going to affect his overall legacy rather than, on a game by game basis. But he's no longer worried about just getting to 50 and getting out. And that was a big issue that he had. And he's not the only player ever that's had, that sort of issue before.
It's a sign of a batter, isn't it? They can come through more difficult periods in their career. Now, for the book, you spoke to the likes of David Bumble-Lloyd, Nasser Hussain, Rahul Dravid, Brian Lara as well. From those conversations you had with them, what is it that makes the very best batters stand out from the very, very good ones?
There was some incredible conversations. Jim will like this story. There's a guy called Bob Knocker White who played for Middlesex for 10 years and then for Nottingham for 10 years. And then he umpired for the next 30 years. He was basically standing on a cricket field for 48 years of his professional life, never really had a job other than cricket. And he would play with Sobers. And he would go up to Sobers and he'd be like, how do I do this? And can you help me with this? And Sobers would give him all these tips. And Bob Knocker White, as the professional he is, would go back in the nets and work on this thing, and he'd get bowled. And he'd be like, I just don't think Garfield Sobers is speaking the same language. And that's the sort of thing that even Rahul Dravid would say that about Brian Lara and Sachin Tendulkar, right? Even Rahul Dravid can see that there's another level up. And a lot of that is subconscious. And it's the thing that we can't teach. And AB de Villiers said one of the best humble brags I think I've ever heard. And he didn't say it in a really arrogant way, but he went, when I'm in the bubble and everything's working and flowing and, it's all subconscious and I don't know what's happening, Mitchell Johnson feels like he's bowling underarm to me. That's the sort of level that a normal human being can't get to. And so that's what you're talking about there, Ali. That's the level that's like right at the top.
Yeah, Jarrod, this is Sunil Gupta for Akashvani in New Delhi. And I've been listening fascinated, actually, to all the stuff that you've been mentioning. You talked about Rahul. But when it comes to Joe Root, what is it that you've noticed about his technique specifically? His decision-making over the years, it's led him to being so close to Sachin Tendulkar.
Yeah, I think one of the big things with Joe Root is the fact that because he's a back foot player, we've seen a couple of players of modern times like this. So Virat Kohli is very much a front foot player, right? Virat Kohli wants to get on that front foot and meet the ball out in front. And Kevin Peterson was another player like that. Joe Root is playing the vast majority of the balls under his eyes, right? Which is, honestly, if we're coming up with a technique, after all these years, we could get rid of the MCC coaching manual. They don't make that one anymore. I'm sure Ali's probably noticed that. It's all disappeared. But if you look at the great techniques, quite a lot of the best players of all time to play the ball right under their eyes. And I think that's a huge advantage for Joe Root in being able to do that, which means that if it is a little bit faster than he thinks it's going to be, or if it's moving more, he has the ability to adjust to that in a way that another player who's pushing at the ball may not have that ability. And if you look at him against spin, he's almost algorithmic against spin. He either plays the ball like 2.5 meters down the pitch, or he plays it right back on his stumps. He never gets trapped in that middle bit. So it's little things like that with Root that I think give him a big advantage over a lot of other players. But it also comes down to the fact that he has a beautiful bat swing. Right. And I think sometimes we kind of forget that, look at someone like Ben Stokes. One of the reasons he doesn't average over 40 in Test cricket, despite his obvious talents, is because his bat swing sort of comes down from an angle. So it's not always coming straight. If you watch Joe Root, the amount of times his bat is coming absolutely dead straight to a ball is, that's the sort of thing that we're all told to do. But most of us have little kinks or bring it in from a different angle. So if you're playing the ball under your eyes with a straight bat swing, you're probably going to hit more balls than a normal human being is going to hit.
In fact, you mentioned that test match in Nagpur, and there was one also later on in another series against India. And of course, India is all about spin and turning pitches. And what is it that the game about Root, which is admired, his game, about dealing with spin? And I realized, if you remember, some years ago, he had a problem with that and kept getting out very, very early on the sweep. And then he adjusted something. What did he do?
Yeah, I think he got to a point, and everyone who's followed English cricket will know this, and there's a little bit on this in the book, that England batters are more obsessed with the sweep than probably anyone else through the history of the game. It probably has something to do with the way that in Asia and Australia, people use their feet, and in English cricket, they didn't use their feet. And so what happens is a lot of younger English batters, I think, just automatically go to the sweep. Whereas what Root started to do is a combination of using his feet and sweeping.
Jarrod, fascinating to get your insights. Thank you so much for being with us on Stumped. That is writer and broadcaster Jarrod Kimber, who has released a book called The Art of Batting, The Craft of Cricket's Greatest Run Scorers. Thanks for being with us.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Well, that's all we've got time for on this week's Stumped for Akashvani. Don't forget you can follow us on X. We're at BBCWS Sport and use the hashtag BBC Stumped. And you can watch us on YouTube as well if you go to the BBC World Service YouTube channel. Thanks to Sunil Gupta, Jim Maxwell, and to all of you for listening. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.
Stumped is a BBC Sport production for the BBC World Service in association with ABC and Akashvani.